So we're talking about the rib cage today. The rib cage. Now, what is the rib cage? Well, it's bones. We know that. Sometimes we can see our rib bones, and sometimes we can't. We can usually feel that there's something going on in there. It's fairly solid, but it's movable, and you can kind of squeeze it, and it has yield to it. This is also our rib cage, and our rib cage comes around to the back, so that's also our rib cage. And that right here, that's also our rib cage. Okay, so what's a rib cage made of? Bones, circular bones. So we're not just looking at bones that are straight and long, we're looking at bones that come around and curve to be a semicircle. And those bones have a bit of flex to them, which means they're kind of flexible. They got a little bit of, not sponginess, because they're strong, but they've got a bit of give to them. It's kind of the difference between an oak tree and a maple tree. You know what I mean? Maybe not a palm tree, maybe not that flexible. Well, those bones just don't float in there, otherwise we just float away, we just fall apart. So those rib bones, where are they knitted onto? What are they knitted onto? Well, at the front, those rib bones are going to be knitted onto our breastbone, right? The breastbone that goes from here to here, the breastbone. It's called the sternum. What about the back? Well, the ribs come around and they get knitted onto the spine bones of the upper back. How many ribs do we have? We've got 12. 12 ribs. They start here underneath our collarbone. Rib 1 is underneath our collarbone, and they go all the way down. Now, what knits those bones together? Well, ligaments. The rib cage is a little different. Not a whole lot of tendon action going on. Not in the sense of the arm. Maybe in a different way. Structure is a little bit different. But what happens is there is muscle there, isn't there? If you've ever seen a drawing of a rib cage, it's white and red. White for bone, red for muscle. Now, what happens when we inhale? Well, our rib cage expands. Hopefully. Our rib cage expands. It's subtle, but it does expand. So if you were to look at that, you'd be able to see that as we inhale, the red gets wider. And as we exhale, the red narrows. Our muscles between our rib bones stretch on the inhale and narrow on the exhale. But how can we make that movement? Our muscles between our rib bones aren't going to allow for that movement because they're busy stretching. How do we breathe? Well, we've got back muscles and we've got chest muscles. We've got neck muscles. We have neck muscles that help the rib cage move as we breathe. Watch. It's subtle, isn't it? Watch here. I'm exaggerating, but that's what happens. Now, what else? What muscle inside of us, down here, just above our stomach? What's that muscle inside of us that lines the inside of the rib cage? Have you ever thought about your inside of your rib cage? It's the same thing on the inside. There's muscle, bone, muscle, bone, muscle, bone, red and white, red and white, red and white, all the way down. And then there's this circular muscle that's about here. And when we breathe, when we inhale, that muscle that lines the inside of our rib cage floats downward. And on the exhale, it floats upward. Downward on the inhale. Upward on the exhale. That muscle is called our diaphragm. And that muscle, as our nervous system tells it to pull downward on our inhale and upward on our exhale, our rib cage moves as we breathe. We expand at the front, and we expand upward and downward. On our inhale, our rib cage expands upward, downward, and outward. And we get bigger. we take up a bit more space in our room. And on the exhale, we take up a little less space in our room. So hopefully you're okay with taking up a little more space sometimes. Because if you're not, you're going to be flexing your rib cage. And that's not going to allow for proper breathing, and you're going to maybe have some mental clarity issues eventually because your breath is not full. Or you might have some stomach upset. Because the stomach lives right under the diaphragm. And actually, the diaphragm helps the stomach to stay mobile within the rib cage and abdomen. That stomach, which we'll talk about at the next video, that stomach does not want to get pinned at the back of the rib cage. And if we're tense and we're flexing here and not allowing this to expand and shrink, our stomach gets pinned. And it's not very happy when it gets pinned. What else is not happy is our lungs. Because we have upper lungs, but our lungs, they go far down. They go pretty far down in our rib cage when they are able to expand fully. And it takes a bit. You almost have to train your body to breathe more deeply, because if you just try to, I'm just going to breathe deeply for the next hour, you're going to have a bit of a headache. You're going to be red-faced, and you're going to feel real tense. And you're going to be a little lightheaded. It takes some training to open up the rib cage again. Not to mention the spine bones. If we're flexed, let's say we're tense, let's say we're around somebody we're not comfortable with, or let's say we're in an environment we're not fully relaxed in, our reflexes are going to flex certain parts of the body, right? We're going to be tense when we're in situations we're not comfortable with. Well, the rib cage gets flexed, particularly down here. We only breathe here. I call it collarbone breathing. So it's tiny little breaths, and the breaths become shallow, right? So we only moving here, and the rest of us is not moving. It's not moving. And then the stomach gets unhappy, and then we're breathing, and then the head gets a little flexed, the shoulders get flexed, and all this stuff happens, and we're not thinking properly, and we get frustrated, or we just get overwhelmed, because we're not free. We've trapped ourselves because we're not allowing this stuff to move the way it wants. It wants to expand and shrink. So deep breathing is a bit tricky because forcing it doesn't really work very well. It's a training process. It's a training process. It's about opening up the spaces between those bones, which is going to take some time. Those muscles have to get used to being a little longer and leaner. To be able to do this, it actually takes both flexibility and strength. We have to strengthen our diaphragm. Kind of like we have to strengthen our bicep by using it. We have to strengthen our diaphragm by using it, by allowing for expansion through our middle as we breathe in. And on our exhale, everything just lets go. That allows for so much great function along our spine. Along our spine, and yes, did you forget about the spine? I told you this was going to be a complicated video. We have our ribs. We have our diaphragm. We have our lungs, our stomach, our muscles in our chest, neck, abs, back. And we have our spine. Remember, those rib bones are attached, knitted onto spine bones at the back. Well, there's also muscles along the spine. There's also muscles along the spine that compress. But we'll talk about that next time in the stomach and intestines video. Why we might get intestinal upset, we might get bloating, these types of things. There's lots of reasons, but let's look at the anatomy around our digestive organs and our spine. See you soon.